remember that. Luger, Meltzer reports here that he felt that Luger had the best ring entrance, coming in with 4 bikini-clad women holding the 4 mirrors.
Now you reminded me of that.
Yeah.
All I can now remember is the commentators going, "Oh, they were talking about those women more than they were talking about Lex Luger."
Yeah.
They were like, "Oh wow, look at that." Oh, well.
Yeah.
It's just a bit cringy now looking back on that.
And of course, there was the whole thing with the X-ray, wanting to give him an X-ray because of the forearm and all the rest of it, and they should order him to remove it because they were going on about the plate and all the rest of it inside. But yeah, I thought it was a first debut kind of match. I mean, you're at WrestleMania. A lot of pressure here on TV to get this one right. I felt like it wasn't a masterclass by any stretch of the imagination, but I felt it was a good start. I mean, you could do a lot worse, and it's WrestleMania, so to be on that card, I felt the only thing with him, I feel like he's very what's the word, like even though this is kind of what the character is, I kind of see him, he's very kind of one-dimensional with the character. I'm not sure how much he's into doing what he's doing, if this is an idea that he's maybe not kind of sold on himself. Kind of feels that way, kind of feels a little bit static in what he's doing here, but nonetheless I think it got across what it needed to do. Little fun fact here. This is an interesting one. Remember the Repo Man, Matt? I'm sure you Reaping Class. Well, he finished up this that past weekend at WrestleMania, and he was doing indies, and apparently is getting into selling car alarms, which is kind of hilarious given the character, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, that's pretty true. How ironic.
Oh dear. You could just imagine him kind of doing like a little video thing package, couldn't you, with himself in wrestling and saying, "Get my alarms. I'll never be able to get in your car." Very interesting that you do that. Okay, so coming out of WrestleMania, it appears, Meltzer reports, that WrestleMania did a 2.1% buy rate, which would be about 430,000 buys, or roughly a 5.8 million gross for Titan, which is nothing to be kind of sniffed at this point. The buy rate would be the lowest of the previous WrestleMania, as expected. But the amount of top of the drop between this year and the previous year would be less than has been the case for the past several years. In comparison with dropping buy rates across the board on WWF pay-per-views events, this small drop should be considered a success again, and a good pay-per-view for those guys. So, I mean, I think what's important here, Matt, is that WrestleMania, for what I'm trying to think now, for since WrestleMania 5 has been in very large kind of sort of huge arenas. They come off of 60-something thousand, and 7 was the same. 6 at the Toronto, and then obviously they've gone here to Vegas. They've kind of set it up like this, and again, this was the sort of, this took on its own thing, Matt, because they wouldn't return to a big stage until WrestleMania 17. So there was quite a gap here. From 9 onwards, in the way they produce WrestleMania going forward. It's also put out there as well that at this point that Luger will be working in programs against Brett in the upcoming house shows, which is going to be in the UK at that time. Of course, doing their traditional trip to the UK. Still back then as well, Matt. They were doing that. So yeah, they did some matches. There was a in England, they aired one of the nights, the house shows that they'd done, and it was Lex Luger up against Jim Duggan, and that ended when Mr. Perfect and Yokozuna interfered in all that, and they kind of all set upon each other. They also would head over to France. Perfect was, at this point, he was working still with Luger. those two were still doing matches with each other, and at the Wembley Arena show, it was still Perfect and Luger. Fun fact here is that Sid Vicious should be around by June with the WWF. That was reported back then. Now, of course, that never actually happened. So interesting that he was getting that. Here's something that I'm sure you remember quite well, Matt. Is fun fact here is that Hogan has been filming Thunder in Paradise of late, with both Beefcake and Jimmy Hart having small roles in the CBS movie pilot that they were putting out. So yeah, it's worth pointing all this out because here was a time, Matt, where I think Vince McMahon, WWF, now they kind of knew that there was going to be maybe a situation here where either Hogan was getting a little bit stale, or Hogan wanted to go and do films and TV, and like he was looking for an out. He's not working as many dates, although he's the WWF champion here, which is really worth pointing out. By all accounts, it was seen that the only reason, at least on WWF's part, to justify that title reign at WrestleMania 9 was because they felt it would get them more ticket sales across the European tour than having Bret or Yokozuna as the champion, which I've got to be honest with you, I don't really buy, but you know, if that's what they thought, that Hogan could draw more, I guess that's why they did it. But it's an interesting one, and they obviously, I think there's kind of like a trust issue going on with both parties at this point. I mean, when you're Hulk Hogan at this point, Matt, I guess you kind of like you can kind of have a little bit of say, and you can play the sort of politics game here because you're not going to be one of the regular guys here. You kind of hold the cards close to your chest here, even with Vince McMahon. Around this time, Matt, I mean, when we look back at this and Hogan at this point, I know us being Bret fans, we're not totally thrilled with what happened at WrestleMania 9, but what was your take on seeing Hogan? Did you see any of that when you were watching the Luger match? Did you skip along to that whole thing again of Hogan coming out late and all that nonsense again? Did you see it any differently this time, or was it still pretty much the same?
Well, you know, I got to say, I've watched this a lot of times. So seeing it again, you know, my opinion still really didn't change that much. It is incredible, as all I can say, is that they could do this. And to sit there, if I was there live watching that unfold in front of me before my eyes, you know, I can't say I'd be very happy. Because they were almost like making it like it was an entire different match, but it wasn't. They might as well have just handed him the title and said, you know what, you know, forget everything that's happened tonight. Hogan, you know, let's just push him to the moon again. And yeah, I can't blame Bret for being a bit annoyed. You know, what a hard worker, and you know, like he's trying to do his best and take the business to new levels. And you know, all the WWF could see at the time was just, you know, dollar signs and looking at the past. Mm-hmm. But it really wasn't the way to go forwards. Yeah,
I kind of feel at this point as well that there's reports here that according to the Hollywood Trade Journal, Hogan will be starring in a movie called Bad Company, a £9 million film to be shot this summer, which once again seems to be limiting the factor in his working for WWF and the house shows. But you know, it's also worth mentioning that I kind of feel like at this point, okay, so he obviously knows people within the industry now, the movie side of it or TV side of it. I kind of feel like he might be playing a bit of a game here where he's kind of trying to negotiate a little bit better with the WWF. I don't know if he's trying to get more leverage by kind of putting these speculated rumours out about all these films. Like, obviously that film never happened, which makes me believe that, you know, where is all that coming from? Is it him himself? I don't know. But I kind of feel like he's definitely looking for an out at this point, even though he does have the strap. Which is very interesting. Now, going back to Lex Luger here, we're going to move forward here, folks, because Luger, for the most of April, worked pretty much the live shows and tapings with Perfect. They kind of done those angles, and that was the matches going around the house shows. So I want to bring us up now to get us into May here. May now. And Lex Luger comes out. He does the posing in front of the small mirrors this time, and then there's this whole thing about his elbow couldn't be used, and they're trying to do an angle with that. Meltzer reports this whole Luger gimmick is becoming a little bit stale already, and that fans aren't, they're not giving him as much heat as he needs. And again, I think that's kind of boils down to the fact that at the time you had Shawn Michaels doing a very, very similar thing here with Sherry Martel, and that whole thing was already going on. And I think Michaels was kind of, even though you didn't like him, it was kind of he definitely had some fans in the crowd that liked his wrestling, so it was kind of hard to go up against him, I think, in that way. Here's another fun fact then, and it goes back to our old friend here, Hulk Hogan. Mr. Nanny, the movie starring Hulk Hogan, is scheduled to be released nationally in mid-June. The movie did well in England, believe it or not, Matt.
Well, I will believe that, because I actually kind of liked that as a kid, as hard as it is for me to admit.
It was in the top 10 for 6 weeks. So it was definitely went down well in the UK. It's interesting that they released it in England before they did in the US, but again, the film industry was a bit different back then. But yes, Hogan released that film. So prior WrestleMania, he was actually doing a lot of media appearances in the UK promoting that film, and it looks like it paid off in that respect, because it seems like it got everybody in, and obviously everybody was watching it at the time. It's also reported that the original plan was for Hogan to face Bret at the King of the Ring coming up, but neither guy at this point wants the job for the other. This is why Yokozuna will most likely win back the WWF title. It's interesting, Matt, that Meltzer's already reporting that, he sees that the Hogan thing is very, is such a small kind of concept for him holding that belt, and that there is no real future leverage with him because of all this stuff going on. Obviously, Bret and Hogan, I'm sure I'm 100% sure we'll cover this issue in a little bit more depth between Hogan and Bret's relationship, but the fact that they couldn't get that match off, Matt, and all the rest of it, and neither guy wanted to job for the other. Did you? I mean, we obviously we covered this King of the Ring back on our retrospective series on the Wrestling Skull podcast, which everyone is more, definitely check that one out. You're more than welcome to check that one out. But were you surprised, Matt, that they would literally go back to the guy that Hogan beat so kind of comfortably at WrestleMania 9, and kind of, because it almost feels like you've kind of destroyed Yoko, and then you kind of want to repackage him again at King of the Ring almost, because maybe they made a mistake here.
I can kind of see that. The second match would not really be as similar as the first one, in terms of how easy it might be, and how strong they make Yokozuna look. But I kind of think I gave him a little bit of a pass on that one. I mean, if we're going to look at it as in strictly like what is the fantasy of WWF, they brought Hogan in. It was a surprise. You couldn't see it coming. All that kind of stuff. And I kind of discount the whole WrestleMania ending, because that whole thing was just so pantomime. It's like, shall I go in the ring? Shall I do it? Everyone cheer for me, and then I'll go in there. Then go on, I'll be champion. And then I do look at the rematch as kind of a bit more of a reality check for Hogan there. Like Yokozuna is fast for a big man. This guy's got talent, and he shouldn't just be buried by someone like Hogan, because someone like Yokozuna is extremely rare to find, in fact. So they should really showcase him as a monster that he is.
Yeah. Well, we go to our first ever King